When I first started coming up here visiting years ago, shortly after our arrival at Hobb Street, it was for the Truth and Love lectures. Come up to sit and listen to that great lectureship. I know it's coming up, and I think of all the work and the pressure and everything that's on the eldership and on Case and Sydney and everybody else here who works to get that lectureship going and moving forward. I'll be thinking about you. And I'll be here, for the Lord willing, for some of it and enjoy it with you. But see, the folks that just come in and sit down don't know what the congregation really goes through to get that together, but I certainly do appreciate that. Also, when I first started coming up here, I came up those steps. Now I come up those steps. Some of you know the reason for that. Some of you know the reason for that. If somebody were to ask you, what's the greatest problem the average Christian has in day-to-day life? In your own mind, what would you say? Well, I would say, based on 46 years of doing local ministry, I would say it's worry, anxiety, just wondering what's going to be next. What do we have to look at? And there are tons of lessons on worry. I preached a couple of them here. But if I were to ask you in conjunction with that question, what is the world's greatest sermon? What would you say? In your mind right now, what are you flipping through? What's the world's greatest sermon? And most of us would say, once we thought about it, well, we might say Acts 17, Paul on Mars Hill, or Acts 2, Peter on the day of Pentecost. But then if we reflected, we would probably say, well, that has to be the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount. And I would say that is the world's greatest, which I do want to remember that it's many sermons. Sermon on the Mount is not just one sermon. It's many sermons, likely more than we have in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, or in the rendition that's in Luke. And it's quite likely that he would deliver, say, what's in chapter 5 over here to this group, and then move over here and deliver what's in chapter 6 to this group, and then go back over here and get chapter 6 covered over here with this bunch, because it's a big place. It's a big place. You know, I've described it before, and you've seen pictures where they tell you that the Sermon on the Mount was delivered. There's a church building there now that, of course, wasn't there then, but it's just a lovely place where you could imagine very well a number of people gathering up to listen to someone speak. And the someone they listened to, of course, was Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. This Sermon on the Mount also shows the superiority of the spiritual over the material, which has been a theme of ours lately. But I wanted to look at part of Matthew chapter 6 and think a little bit about how it contains, and this is, when I preach on worry, if I were to do one sermon on worry, I wouldn't go here. If somebody said, Bill, we want your best sermon on worry, I'd go to Philippians 4. That's where I'd go, because it's direct and to the point about worry. But this is different. And it's amazing to think that something like what's in Matthew chapter 6, and John already read the first part of the passage, but what's in that chapter is really practical steps that we can take within ourselves to defeat worry. Now, normally we think in order for me to defeat worry, what has to happen is what I'm worried about has to go away. I worry about a lot of things. I'll admit it. I know not to let it get to me, and I know how I know how God wants me to handle worry. But things do occur to me to think about. And I don't mind sharing those with you. I have already. But the point, in fact, is that expecting that which you are concerned about, if you want to use the word concern. A lot of preachers say, if I change the word worry to concern, I'm home free. But it's the same thing. If you expect that the solution to the problem of worry or concern or anxiety is for the element that's causing the difficulty to go away, big trouble. Because it's not going away. We live here on this earth. And we'd like to think there'd be periods of time when we can be happy-go-lucky about life, and there are. But ultimately, there are going to be some serious issues that we have to think about. If you want to use the term think about, you can use that term too, instead of worry. But I looked at this the other day, trying to think about a way to approach the question of worry from the point of view of the latter part of Matthew chapter 6. Of course, Jesus says no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. All right, and that's the sermon on materialism right there in one verse. That's the truth about materialism in one verse. Then he says, therefore, and you know the old preacher says, when you see therefore, you always ask the question, what's the therefore, therefore? I know you had instructors that told you that. I had them that told me that. I guess I heard Guy Wood say it 100 times. Therefore I say to you, take therefore no thought. Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, nor yet for your body what you shall put on. Is not the life more than food, and the body more than raiment? Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, neither nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? And which of you by taking thought could add 1 cubit to your stature? And why take thought for your raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If God so clothed the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things also the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth ye have need of these things. I'll stop there. What I have here is 3 or 4 words that come out of this passage that will help us manage worry, concern, whatever you want to call it. Number one word, observation. Observation, right out of here. Jesus says, look around at nature. Look at what God has created. Just look at it. Can you imagine doing anything like that yourself? Can you imagine creating? You can't imagine that. We couldn't do that. That's something only God could do. He's the only one who ever could do it. He's the only one who did it. He certainly did it. Look around. If God can handle all of these things, can he not handle my problems? Long time ago, I studied organic chemistry. I've tried to forget it ever since. Wake up in the middle of the night, with carbon atoms running around in a circle. I got a hold of it long enough to get out of the course. It's amazing. Another one I really liked was physics. I liked that. Forgot all that too. Don't remember any of it. Recently, last few years, I asked my eye doctor. We were talking about evolution. He was a believer. I said, Doc, how did the eye evolve? He said it couldn't have. I knew his answer was going to be that. He said the eye cannot have evolved. He says because an eye that's 99% complete won't work. An eye that's not completely developed and functioning will not allow the holder of that eye to see. The whole system has to be in place. Can't have everything missing. It's an argument for creation. Argument for creation. Now, I'm willing to debate anybody who wants to think about how that there's other evidence in a different direction, but I'm not talking about anything but one eye. I'm talking about the human eye with the unique abilities that it has. But God made that eye, didn't He? And you know, if you could get Adam and Eve or any of their offspring or anybody from the Old Testament, if you could get them over to a good ophthalmologist's office today and say, would you check this fella's eye out? You know what the ophthalmologist would tell you? The eye doctor would tell you, that eye is just like your eye. Somebody says, well, what about, environmental evolution? Oh, yeah, if you live in dirty air long enough, it'll mess up your sight. That's certainly the truth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about relying on all-powerful deity to get us through the tough spots in our lives. And part of the reason we can be confident in doing that is our observation of the world around us. If He can do that, He can handle my problem. But observation's not enough. What Jesus suggests here with His use of words like take no thought or wherefore, which is calling for a conclusion. What Jesus says, observe and then contemplate. Contemplation. I'm using contemplation as a word because I want it to end with T-I-O-N. Observation, contemplation, so you remember that better. In other words, just think about it. Look what's out there in the world and just think about it. It's an amazing thing what He's done in creation and the continuation of our existence on this planet. But then you say, well, wait a minute, Bill. Creation was a miracle. And that's true. It was a supernatural act of God. And you say, well, are you telling me that God will do a miracle for me? In other words, is he going to help my back? Is He going to cure this disease? Is he going to supernaturally provide more money in the bank for the end of the month, that tragic moment when you realize there's not quite enough there? The Bible doesn't teach you to do that. Well, what does it teach us? It teaches that although God will not help us supernaturally according to what the Bible teaches, He helps us in ways that we cannot comprehend. You know, one thing that is necessary when it comes to understanding God's involvement in our lives. Here's the big word: humility. Humility. I don't have to understand how God helps me to trust Him to help me. Do you? That's a simple statement. I know, according to the Bible, the age of the miraculous is past. The only way you can have anybody doing miracles is if you had somebody, one of the apostles, lay hands on that individual, endow them with miraculous spiritual gifts, and all the apostles are gone. I'm not looking for that. What the Bible tells me is that if I want to have some confidence in my God, I just have to trust Him. I can't, listen, people say, tell me how God's going to do this. It can't be done. We're not God. We're not capable of understanding what God is able to do because He's God and we're not. Bible says in Hebrews 11:6, but without faith it's impossible to please Him, for he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. We simply have to trust the Lord. That's what contemplation, thinking about what the power of God as it's seen out in the world. We already know that the end game of humanity is death. The beginning of a human life is birth. There's nobody who doesn't know that. Everybody knows that. We cannot short circuit that particular cycle. And everything that goes with it, which are the trials of human life, are part of human life. And if we're sick, we may well get better, and we ought to thank God for that. Right? If I get sick and get better, I'm thanking my Lord for that. As the old doctor told me one time, he said, God heals everybody. All we do is get the impediments of healing out of the way. Not supernatural, it's natural. It is spiritual. What's the possible remaining answer when we contemplate, we observe and contemplate reality? It is that life is really not about the here and now. It's not. So if it's not, why spend an inordinate amount of time? You're going to worry about some things. You're going to be concerned about some things. If life is not about the here and now, why worry about it? You do your best with what's in front of you. You do your best with what's in front of you. It doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, where you are in life. I'll tell you a little story, a little illustration. Just thought of it. I really did just think of it. I dated one of the prettiest girls I ever saw in my life for 3 years, over 3 years. Then one day, there's an expression the kids use today. It's about what happens when the trash truck comes down. It lifts up, it dumps the trash. There's an expression used when a girl does that to a guy. All right? That happened to me, and I said, well, there you go. Boy, it just threw me for a loop. Now I look back and I see, look, I got much prettier girl, better girl, finest girl. I didn't do anything about it. It's life unfolding. Somebody says, well, Bill, I see that observation, that contemplation, that's pretty good if things work out. But there's also application. Because I know what some of you might be thinking. I know what people think when I've talked about this sort of thing before. In terms of application, they say, Well, Bill, you just don't understand. My troubles, my trials, my challenges are worse than anybody's I've ever seen. My situation is not remedied by what you're talking about, because my situation is so terrible, it's so bad. Now, everybody in here will recognize and realize there's some of us do have it worse than others, and we know that. We know that. And we're not minimizing the fact that you might be one of those people that has a real tough row to hoe in your life. And maybe you do. But what am I benefited by looking, say if I look over here and see this brother, I say, well, now that brother, he's got more money. He's got a better looking house. His kids call him and talk to him every so often. He's got all these good things that I don't have. So consequently, I'm down in the dumps about it. Well, for the child of God, that kind of thought will not benefit. And the reason is, as a child of God, as a Christian, would you say, all right, here's what I want to see happen. I want his situation to be mine, and my situation, which is horrible and terrible, to be his. I want to dump my situation on him and I want the good situation on me. Really? Would a Christian do that? Would a Christian say, all right, I know I don't have a terrible disease. If you do, I want you to be having the disease, and I want to be free from it. We can't go through life thinking, my situation's not as good as yours, therefore I'm unhappy and it worries me. I've got friends, family members who will sometimes say, oh, you just don't understand what I go through. Folks, nobody understands what the other fella goes through. We don't go through what the other person goes through. He goes through what he goes through. I go through what I go through. Isn't that right? Isn't that simple logic? But in either instance, isn't it the case that what makes sense, since we don't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, what makes sense is just to rely on God, trust him, have faith in our Lord. You're going to be okay. That's what we have to do. And then the last one. We've had observation, contemplation, application, and supplication. Supplication is a fancy word for prayer. In Matthew chapter 7, we'll skip over to 7. In verse 7, it says, ask, and shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Somebody says, I don't know about that. I don't know. Well, think about it. Jesus goes on to say, or what man of you, whom if his son asks bread, will he give him a stone? If he asks a fish, will he give him a serpent? If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good gifts to them that ask him? Now, before you go to bed tonight, read 7 through 11. Because that's the answer to all the questions about worry. That's pray. Somebody says, well, I prayed. I had this conversation with a fellow. It was a fellow that I still know real well, but about every week he would say, I've been praying, and no answer comes. I'm still worried. I said, pray some more. Just pray some more. Just keep praying. But you got to believe. He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Hebrews 11:6. You got to believe that God will help you. Oh, it's not supernatural. That's what makes it hard for us to believe it. We think, well, if we could say, poof, there's the money. Poof, there's the health. That would be great. But it's not that way. It's not that way. It's not promised anywhere. Only time something like that happened when an apostle or Jesus Christ himself wanted to make a point. God wanted to make a point. It's the only time anything like that ever happened. Supplication, prayer. If ye then being evil, in other words, being human, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good gifts to them that ask him? So they say, well, I'm asking. Got to keep asking. I'm praying. Keep praying. Can't stop. Can't stop. But you got to believe. That's what trust is. We trust the Lord God. When you get right down to it, in a way, the Sermon on the Mount is about limits. Matter of fact, the New Testament's about limits. God placed limits upon us. And on the subject we're discussing this evening, a limit that helps us understand worry for ourselves and worry in the lives of other people that we care about is in chapter 7, verse 12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Maybe I would be able to handle my worry better if I looked around and found somebody who was worried about something and went to work to help them with their problem. You ever think about that? I don't know why verse 12 is where it is if that's not what we're supposed to talk about. That's what we're supposed to think about. You're all wrapped up in worry about something. Why don't you find somebody who's worried about something and help them see what happens? That's the golden limit. That's the golden rule. My dear friends, worry will not dissipate magically. Concern will not disappear overnight. You're a human being. You're going to be thinking about things right on through. But just look what God has done. Think about it. Apply it to yourself and pray to God, trusting Him for an answer. Don't tell Him what the answer is supposed to be. See, there's a trick. God, I think if my problem would be better if X, Y, and Z. You leave the X, Y, and Z up to the one who invented everything. Let Him decide what the answer's going to be. We get in trouble with worry when we figure out the answer and ask God to give us our answer. Maybe that's not the answer we need to have. Certainly wasn't the case in the illustration I made earlier. Now tonight, if you're a Christian, you know these things and you have a great deal of confidence in your God and you're willing to trust Him for those answers. But if you're not a child of God, if you don't believe that Jesus is the Christ, you can start believing. The Bible's the evidence. You can go there. If you need to turn away from your sin, you can turn away from your sin starting right this very moment. If you need to confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, you can do that before this crowd of people. And you can be baptized, immersed in water for the remission of your sins, to be raised to walk in newness of life. Jesus himself, having given us the shorthand to that, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be damned. And if you need to come back to the Lord, realize the blood of Christ will keep on cleansing you as long as you truly repent and confess. If you need to respond to God's call, we pray that you do so as together we stand and sing.